Good afternoon. First of all, I want to say this is the most delightful entrance that I've had to a speaking engagement yet. I love wandering these streets. I love coming in and being surprised by a really intimate but large audience area. It's really fabulous, so thank you for inviting me. What I'm going to talk about today is somewhat of a variety, but it's all based on what kind of criteria, how do you find your criteria, and how does that work in the Middle East, as opposed to New York, Chicago, Amsterdam, Tokyo. Because all of those should have some sort of variation in the way you choose or how you order the parameters for your project. I've called it, just because they asked me to have a name for this, criteria integration is a construct for form-giving and sustainable outcomes. But a lot of this is based on sustainable outcomes. And when I first heard about sustainability, I'd been doing it for years, I just didn't know I was doing it. And when I saw projects that were being done that were very sustainable, it kind of scared me. They were mostly ugly. And they were about the technical ends of it. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is it can be integrated into it. And most of the projects you'll see here are gold LEED projects. We started out wanting certified, which is the lowest. We easily passed silver, and we finally wanted gold. So it's not an impossible thing to do, especially if you start out with a mindset. So, there. So to start, what I'd like to do is, this is bits and pieces of things that Perkins Will works around the world. I've spent, well, as a short introduction, I started out at SOM, Skidmore, in Chicago. I was there for 12 years. I got to be a studio head and an associate partner. Left there to run a Kuwaiti firm. Kuwaiti had 4 other offices, and that was my first real experience in the Middle East. I spent 4 years there. When I came back, I left SOM and went to Perkins Will. I've been there ever since about 10 years ago. 10 years ago, if you don't know, DAR Group owns, or we're part, Perkins Will and Dar Al-Handasa are both part of DAR Group. They also have TY Lin and a whole bunch of other people, which allows us then to have collaboration at the most intimate levels. But if I go back, you'll see at the bottom here that I'm a design principal at Perkins Will, and I am also director of design for Dar Al-Handasa in Dubai. And because they're sister companies, I can do that. I'm a very rare breed. There aren't very many of us. But that's why I'm going to be showing you things that both Perkins Will and DAR have worked on, and that it can work. And I also want to hopefully show you that Dar Al-Handasa is actually a very good architectural firm. They're not just doing architecture that is spawned from the engineering group. So with that in mind, we'll go forward. So basically the first couple of slides are going to be about how do you get these outcomes, especially in the Middle East. And it's really quite easy if you pay attention. Most of you, I'm preaching to the choir, but I also use this in many speeches where the Middle East is an unknown, or they're first getting into the Middle East. And I want them to understand some of the ethos, some of the culture, traditions, and how, in fact, we actually are following them in many of our sustainable ways. So, basically, the first one is inwardly focused courtyards, indirect entries into interior spaces, and enlarged public spaces near building entries. All of that, I'm sure you realize has happened, but a lot of people don't realize that happened. And it's about the light, it's about the material, and it's about the sort of the surprise. It's almost like coming into this auditorium from a very small lobby, and then having this expand on you. The surprise and the wonder that that creates, maybe a small wonder, but it's still a wonder. The next piece is the narrow streets. Because of the organic nature of the way that the cities and villages came to be, Dubai is a good example, Bahrain is another. It was basically a pearl diving, or basically built around the sea. Small little elements that finally tied themselves together. But the interesting thing about that is because they're so tight, one building shades the walkway between the other. So you get these cooler spaces, and sometimes by 10 degrees, depending on the time of year. But these, the shade that's created, as you can see, in some of these areas, it is part of that sense of wonder. It's what people go actually to Europe.
It's 4 o'clock.
And wander through these kind of organic streets, very tight streets, and everyone thinks that's Europe. But in fact, on a much different level, it's also here in the Middle East, and we need to understand that. Another sustainable aspect of that is the solid walls. They're really heat sinks. And basically what happens, not all times of year, but at night it's quite cold. During the day it's warm. So the walls actually collect the heat and then radiate them at night when it's cold. So it's a very beautiful kind of indigenous approach that works very well. And of course the smaller windows, you don't let in as much solar energy. You don't get the glare aspects and that sort of thing. Speaking of glare, one of the things that is enduring as you walk through many of the city streets of the Middle East is the use of mashrabiyas and screens and that sort of thing. And it's not just about the privacy. That's one of the reasons that people could be associated with the street, the activity on the street, but not be seen. But it also lets in ventilation. You can close them down or open them up. And of course the patterns that are created on the inside are magnificent. So that's another thing that just happens here. People don't think of it, but it's a very sustainable idea. The organic growth, we talked briefly about it, but there's a human scale also about. In fact, one of the questions that Franz got to answer was about why a high-rise in the middle. I'm glad you got it, not me. The building materials here, they basically used, here in Bahrain, it's a coastal town, and coral was used as building blocks, and filled in with mud and that sort of thing. Long spans, no, there weren't any. Palm trees, and hardwood was, they actually traded pearls for hardwood. They would go over to India. The trade was, according to the weather, of course, winds. But there was a trade that was basically, they'd go over and they'd bring in hardwood. And from that, and a lot of Indian artisans would come over, and they would fashion the doors, they would fashion longer spans and that sort of thing, and the decoration from the hardwood. So that's something to remember. These days, of course, we can span 30 meters, and it's not a big deal. But the intimacy and the approach that takes is something to remember about when you're dealing with it over here. And so what I'm sort of talking about is the adaptation of these things that are natural, indigenous to the culture, and become part of the traditional and cultural elements. Okay. Landscape, of course, depending on where you are, if you're in various areas, the landscape can be either highly sustainable or no landscape, or if you're in a wadi, say Wadi Hanifa, in Saudi Arabia, where you get the floods and there is constant water, or when you use water in the Middle East, it can be sparingly done and it has a huge effect. And of course, so that's something to remember too. And then of course, natural light. I was lucky enough and old enough that I actually had a Louis Kahn as a credit in college. And I swear, half of his critics were about how does the light hit that space? How are you using light? Okay, so don't forget light, and it's a wonderful thing. Actually, we're talking about the first project I ever did in Saudi Arabia, and that is the Qura campus. And at that time, this is the late 80s. There were rolling brownouts going through all of Saudi Arabia. We had to be sustainable. This is before sustainability. We had 90% of the universities could conduct their business without electricity because we had courtyards, we had marshalias, we walked in natural light and a way that you didn't create glare. And you didn't create extra thermal. So that's something to remember. And the last point here, which is, this slide is like 15 years old, but I took it here in Bahrain because it was one of the places where wind towers were still being used. There was a restaurant here called the Wind Tower. And I think all of you know how they work, that it catches breezes going through, and then it's channeled by these doors, so to speak, that come in. And there's stakes in the wall and much reading. But what we did at Qura was there was some research being done at the University of Arizona. Now, if you don't know the states, Arizona is a lot like the empty parts of Saudi Arabia and that sort of thing. So research was being done on wind towers, and we took that research and we put it back in, and basically, I'm going to go to the torch, I think it's, this is a little easy to see. What we did is we installed a 1.5 horsepower pump. 1.5 horsepower pump. We had a small reservoir, and then we had plasticine sheets, which were this, and then it slowly released water from these plasticine sheets. That brought the air in. If there was no wind, the evaporation brings the air in and actually funnels the air, the cooler air would go down. And so, even at times when there was no wind at all, we had that capability. The difference in Fahrenheit from outside temperatures, let's say it was 90 degrees, it was 15 degrees less in this place. I'm going to go back just for a second. You see these elements here? Here, and on the other side, these are the nodes where the spine turns. Each one of those was a major wind tower. And it worked. And we've actually, one of the projects I'm going to show you, utilizes that yet again. So don't forget old technology. Okay, the 3 projects that I'm going to present today are actually not the things we're doing in the studio. These are older projects. This is in Qura. This is PNU, Princess Noor University, or Women's University of 50,000. Actually, they probably 60,000 women into it now. And this is a newer university. This one, they were looking to have a sense of being Saudi. What does it mean to be Saudi? And so there's a lot more use of screens and that sort of thing, and patterns, and you'll see how that changes the architectural. Whereas at the Dubai University, they're looking to make a statement about something completely new and something really organized differently, highly sustainable, and what does that mean? And the final one, just a couple of slides on KFD, which is King Abdulaziz Financial District. All of these projects, by the way, I was the design director on, but like the first one, let's go to the first one. Princess Noor University. If you drive from the airport, you go right by it. It takes about 10 minutes of your drive to go by this. It is 800 acres, or about 200 acres, or 800 hectares. Number million square feet, or 30 million square feet, and 3 billion square meters. We designed every building on the campus, which is about 184 buildings, every building, fire station, everything. And every one of them was designed using a LEED scorecard. So, though we only looked at 38 of them to be actually certified, every one of them is equipped with the basics, was looked at in a sustainable way. Fun fact, okay? When I was doing this, this was the reason I came over here from Chicago. And the reason was that it was just too big, and it needed 7 offices of Perkins Will, 3 offices of DAR, and for about 2 years I had 1,500 architects and engineers working under me to do this. The team, by the way, we had 2.5 years, we had no curriculum. We knew that there were 8 colleges, and that was it. We had to design the curriculum, we had to design the program from the curriculum once we got that approved. And then we had to design the buildings, then we had to build the buildings in 2.5 years. Now, if you think about that, this is an entire campus from ground up, all infrastructure, everything, and highly sustainable. It was quite a feat. I didn't really think we could do it, but I was proven. So another interesting fact is that we had something like 380 DAR and Perkins Will people on the site for about 2 years, overseeing all of these buildings. And one that I don't like thinking about, I had between 700 and 800 emails a day that I had to answer, at least half of those, because I had these offices around the world that were working on this project. So there were some challenges here. What I'm going to talk about here is use of regional materials, okay? And really, some of the same things we talked about in terms of those things which we automatically see in these smaller villages. But the narrow streets, the solid mass, the solar screening, gardens, water use sparing, etc. So this was an early Revit model that we produced. This was from the Miami office of Perkins Will that I was working with at that time. And I think what's interesting here is you can start to see the density of this thing, because obviously walking, we talked about, somebody was talking about walking distances before. It's a huge university, and we were trying to keep the university into measurable elements. But if you look a little deeper, what you're going to see is you'll see the wind towers, okay? You're going to see courtyards. You're going to see solar shading over areas, both atriums, in other words, cool, and also open, where the wind towers actually were doing the cooling. And then precast screens, regional stone, etc. This was one of the early elevations that we were dealing with, and you can kind of see how these things fit together. One of the aspects of doing, especially in that particular time at Saudi, doing a women's college meant that everything was there. And so actually, like the women with the bias, etc., the actual university became veiled from the outside as well. And so that was part of sort of the metaphor that we were using. How do we do that? Okay. First of all, we use regional materials. I personally visited within about 25 kilometers, just about every site of limestone. And you've got this kind of range. You've got a cream, a white. The white is quite a nice material. It's turned a little different when I'm trying to use it. It's a little darker and has more inclusion. And then they have the sort of gold, and then there's a sort of a reddish gold. And we were actually told to use all of them. They wanted to mix. It was sort of out of our control there, but we used it in many different ways. This was a mock-up that we did, which gives you this kind of a experience. It's like a stone mashabia, but in fact, we have conference rooms, we have library uses behind these things. Mostly internally focused, so you're not looking out, but you're allowing the light to come in. At night, of course, I'll show you a slide that gives you a feeling that you're actually living in a lantern. So this and this are this kind of thing. There's lots of patterned stone elements, and then of course we're using stone in the interiors as well. In terms of solar screening, each campus had a different theme to it. The problem that you get is you might fall in love with this kind of screen, this Islamic pattern, and then it's everywhere, and then it gets tiresome. So one of the things we did is you'll notice that the screens change from buildings to buildings, but there's always a sense of unification in them. And we even had, these I think were first used in the Hajj, these big canopies, all that. But we found that in the winter, we wanted it closed. We wanted that Sunday in there. People, the ladies love that. But in the summer, they open up. And there's a lot of like portico types of situations, and of course, the portico. Here's some more. You see some of the variations on the screens that I was talking about. You have a number of different types of screens. Some of these were being used as veils. Some of them were being used as solar protection, and came with the fact that it also modified those very harsh light that you get there. This is in the health research campus. And here's even another screen, but a lot of our bridges connected across the campus for both privacy and so that we didn't have to use the AC as much. This is a facade that, and you can see this in another one at night, which is quite nice. This is what I was talking about in terms of really becoming a lantern of sorts. And you would say it's an Islamic lantern, even though it's not the right shape because of the different patterns you can see here and the light effects. And we thought about this ahead of time, but in many places we were really surprised at how effective it was at night. It really made a wonderful feeling to it. And outdoor spaces like this was off the student union. This is an indoor space, but you control the light in one of the sort of modern wind towers. And in fact, we even were able to supercharge these by putting our return for the air conditioning through these things so you get cooler air coming through as well. Another thing is the evaporative cooling. These are actually very effective. And what we did is, if you look and see where we located these things, these are very shallow. We probably have no more than 30 centimeters of water, actual water, and sometimes it's even less than that. Because what you're getting is you're getting the wind blowing over the top, and you get evaporative cooling, so that condensate cools the water, cools the air. You've seen it when you've been in hot areas, you see the spray, in the public spaces to cool everything down. So we used it, and a lot of times these were associated with fountains, so that we had a little bit of spray there as well. Here's fountains. This is one of the student rec centers, but usually at entries, we use this as a way of cooling. Here it looks like they're huge, but in fact, this is about 6 meters wide or diameter, and you see there's 1, 2, 3. So each one of these could be, you could gather around it, and it also supplied the sense of water, the sound of water, the reflection of water. All of these things were very important to us. The overall site you see here, another aspect of this is to connect this so that you never had to walk more than about 100 meters as a person. We had 17 stations of APMs. We had an APM that ran around, you see it here, running around the entire campus, connecting all areas, staff housing, student housing. A lot of this was commuter campus, so not all the students lived on campus. And of course, all the services back here. But we're quite proud that at one time in Saudi Arabia, our lead projects were 2/3 of all lead projects in the country. Now, as a variation to that, where we were really trying to get into the soul of what it is to be Saudi and express that a little bit more definitely, at the University of Bahrain, it's quite a different thing. It's quite modern. The sunscreen is quite modern. We tested it in wind tunnels. It has all sorts of capabilities. We used a synthetic knit material up here, which gave you about 60% shading, which really cooled it down. It's quite nice. We used horizontal shades, and basically, I call these things patterns after the fact, because that's what they kind of appear to be. This is a smaller university, obviously it's in 3 phases. We've built one, we're about ready to get into the second phase. And you can see the statistics there. So here what I'm going to talk about is some of the same issues, but treated a different way, okay? So basically, we inherited this project. Actually, AICOM did the original composition and one with a sort of a golden mean as a way of approaching this. And then we were given the project to design and implement and site and everything. It was just a completely different site than where AICOM originally did it. But what we did is we started to immediately look at what these panels could be, what could they be, how close do they become, and start to define that. We did these studies, and this is back when Ecotech was the big thing. They're no longer around, but there's other softwares. But what it does show you is that in these creases and in certain areas where we go about doing the shading, it really works. And so that's what we did. And basically then we also added sort of the central area. And since let's go to the next one. This is not heat, this is actually topography. It was high at the side and lower as it went down the hill. And so what we did is we decided to take advantage of that. So each one of these steps down around this arc. And what it does is it provides sort of this forecourt for each one of the students, each one of the disciplines. So each one of these tiers is a department. This water becomes a nice cooling element as well as a visual and auditory. And then there's the central area, which is up here, which is sort of the main quad, if you could make that definition. So basically, we started to look at what are these things made of and how can we do them so that the university can afford them. Which is always going to come back at you. You know, you can have these great ideas, but somebody's got to pay for it. So we started looking at our structural tubes and what this stuff is made of, and actually the textures and some of the way that these things are knit together are some of the most successful things, I think, in the university. But you can see basically how we did it. We actually had this go over the building. We put a central court in these buildings as well, so we get natural light, and so they were single loaded, and you had a lot of natural light coming into this, and those became departmental quads, and that's where students and professors meet and that sort of thing. Quite nice. Okay, so this shows some of the wind studies that we're doing. Basically, what we did is we allowed. You see these how these arc in here. What that does is that allows the wind to escape because there's updraft to anything like this. It's almost like a wing, and tying it down is almost more important than supporting it from below. So we looked at that, and the curve and how it interfaces the building became very important. So it didn't just happen, but there was a lot of technology behind how it happened. We also looked at wind direction, and we looked at how this thing works, because we had this master plan, but it wasn't sited. And so we wanted to do it site correctly, both in solar orientation, and also in wind direction, and also in the way that it layered down. And it just so happened that we had a site that gave us all of those, and we were able to then micro-tune it so that it's in more or less the perfect location. So, what's another thing? Okay, we had basically, as you can see, this is north. This is a glass wall. Always, just like as the previous project, the fins get smaller as you get to the north, you have the protection by and so basically, we did the same thing, but we had the main university offices in this first building and the approach to it. And so we decided to put horizontal fins over the entire thing and use those, like a washer here, to reflect light up. So we got reflected light, but also to take the thermal energy down. We did study that, which is what you see here. This is without the fins, this is with the fins. So we're getting even into blue areas here, which is the very effective use of these solar fins. So basically, you can do this stuff, but unless you test it, you don't know if you're really working, if it's working for you. So to convince the client that you need this, you're not just going to have windows there. This is one way that you do it. You do it with technology. So here you see those sort of wrinkles where we allow the wind to escape. And one of the things is there's two parts of this. It's a commuter campus right now. We haven't gone to the second phase. So the students all arrive to the outside. And so that's why these things, the petals come out and shade this area and the main entry. But on the inside, that's where student life happens, off of the water and where these porches are. So it all ties together that way. So you start to see some of the articulation that we've done. Here's looking through one of the holes in the wall. Surprisingly enough, we call this the wall because it is a wall, but it's perforated. We started out thinking that this was going to be stone clad, and we found out that structurally we had to add so much structure because it becomes a sail. That it was getting too expensive, so we looked at another way of doing it. So basically it became perforated, which I like even better. You can see some of this exposes the slope of the administration building through, so you get these views through. This is the horizontal slats. This is within between buildings, and where the light comes, you get the horizontal slats again. This is like just off the main circle at the top, which is where what we call the main quad, sort of mixing quadrangle and circle. And you can see that sort of the power of these elements. These are, the tubes themselves are about this big. And of course the wind is catching them, the weight themselves. So how this all ties together is very interesting. And at the back of this, they actually penetrate the wall, so you have a series of things. This is one of the details where two of these things come together. Actually, it's taken right there, but these come together, two petals, and then where you got them. I love some of these details better than the architectural details they're supposed to look. So this is one of those interior courtyards that are planted. We allowed holes, we got natural light through there. And these are really wonderful little microcosms, very small gardens. There's a little bit of water, again, just for the feeling of it. This is one that is not between the administration building and the first one, but it's treated as a garden and you can walk through there if you want to. So these were some early perspective, actually late perspective, which showed kind of the bigger campus. It's been occupied for a year, but I still haven't gotten out to take pictures, so you see some of them, but this kind of gives you the bigger feel. An interesting thing is that this was sponsored by the Bahrain Chamber, And the client there is very interested in sustainability. So one of the things we did is to sell this amount of water, was we actually use it as a cooling reservoir for the chillers. Instead of having water-cooled chillers and big plants and lots of stuff like that, we throw the water through there, take it at the top, it cools as it goes down, lots of little waterfalls, irrigation, and then we take it back up into the cooling plant at that point. So it's being used in 7 different ways, aesthetically, and also for its chiller plants. And just a cute shot. Okay, the last one, and this is really short, is KFD. This, if you don't know KFD, it's like a museum for architects. And we invited architects from around the world. And Foster's there, Adrian Smith is there, Ginzer, Perkins Will, we did 3 buildings there, and a whole bunch of very well-known architects. They taught us all at a time when there was no projects out there. So they got us cheap, and we all are working in the same place. Anyway, this is the master plan. It was actually one of the better master plans I worked in. It was by Henning Larson. And it was the first time I worked with them. I was quite impressed with them. And something as tight as this, and some of these buildings are like 50 and 60 stories tall. My building, which happens to be orange, so you can see it, is not one of the taller buildings, but it's important in terms of it's a bookend from one side of this major roadway to here to the other side. And it also fronts on what they call the Waddies, which were where all of the museums, the attractors as they call them, were located, and also a pedestrian way, because there's lots of shading and food and beverage outlets and that sort of thing. You see it here, and not the tallest building, and not the church building. What I'm going to show here is that sometimes it's not about the architecture and the place you're in, because the master plan was so prescriptive in this case in terms of architectural guidelines. That became a major parameter. Concept studies, solar studies, and so this is just a quick tour. This is the kind of master plan we're dealing with. They said our building had to engage these 3 points. Think about that for a second, okay? Your building has to engage those 3 points. And the building, in terms of, because they wanted a high rise, we couldn't engage those 3 points unless we somehow figured out another one. Also, we had to look at site access where they're coming from. In fact, I think Foster's building is my neighbor back here. They encouraged us to create a gateway between our buildings, because it was the quickest way to all of this, which is the green space. This is my building here, and this building, and this building. So we created this little gateway element. So some of these things became quite important. Some one of the guidelines was it should be faceted. Everything has to be faceted. We want faceted. We're really interested in faceted. And we said, well, that's nice, but there should be a reason for faceting, right? And so we started looking at how, and this was the very first model. And my senior architect, we cut it up with cardboard and drafting nuts. So you can see how we were still using drafting nuts at this point. How many of you use drafting nuts? Hey! But they work pretty well. This was like the 5th generation of this model, and you can kind of tell. But the idea was that this was the south side. Oops, this is the north side, and this was the south side. In the north side, we wanted to encourage light. On the south side, we wanted to discourage light. And these were just some quick sketches that I did that sort of started to talk about how this might work. But basically what you see here is this is the north side. And we actually have the slope of the roof coming this way. On the south side, the slope of the roof goes backwards. So by actually creating these facades that actually shade the building themselves, we were able to save something like 45% of the HVAC costs just by a simple change, because basically what we found out was between 11:30 and 2:30, which is the hottest times of the year, and during summer, this worked beautifully. Just that little bit, you'll see it as we get into the model. And we also, of course, looked at the shading. How does that affect this, and what is that for? These I don't have built. I was there 2 days ago. They wouldn't let me outside because the whole thing is closed. Saudi, there's some other things going on right now, and so they just stopped the project. But so I couldn't get outside. So these are Revit models, basically, that you're seeing here. So they're not going to blow you away with their artistic qualities and stuff. These are basically the ones we use to study the facade. But basically, you see what we did here. This has actually been in a book already about high performance facades and sustainability, where they point out, and I won't go into those kind of details, but it's a very high performance facade where we used on east and west, we used vertical fins. You can see them here, you can see them here, and you see it here. This is, by the way, that gateway that I was talking about that we needed to do. As we got into this, we started studying this in physical models as well as computer models. And one of the things I felt like doing was actually making this building make a shift. Because one side was bending inward, and the other side was bending outward. And it made sense for me that these two facades would sort of collide and become the total thing. So that's what you sort of see. You see the extension of these areas. This was also for privacy, but it afforded about a 15% reduction by just extending these fins on the outside of these cones, east and west and south and north. Okay. This is the other building, which is how we finally reached that funny part that was way over there. We had a commercial. This was multi offices, apartments, retail. The whole thing was in here. It's very tight. These are some of the renderings. This was a study we did where it actually changed what happens in that space when it starts slanting outward and then going up again. And this is, of course, when the light is very low. But what we saw later, and this shows the perspective of it, but what we found out was this was all in shape for at least 4 hours inside. So it was working for us. This, on the other hand, is the transition from office space to above this is the apartments. And we used the natural light on the slope going the other way to bring natural light into an atrium space. So it worked for us that way. And there's some, that's the gateway. And we, oh, by the way, we also had, every building was connected to another building. So there were these skyway walks that we had to incorporate into the project as well. Here you see some of the sort of angular aspects of it and some of the extended volumes. And you go up. And finish, since most of you think, or that don't know DAR, and I am now a design director with DAR in Dubai, I'm just going to flash by a couple of buildings, and I'm not going to talk about them. Some of them I can't talk about, but I just wanted you to see that we're actually engaged in something other than really low tech stuff. Okay? And of course, you can see the use of screens. Actually, this is, I was talking to a lady from Oman. This is the new, yeah, hey, I can talk about it. Yeah, I can't really talk about it. This is also the This is TikTok. pharmaceuticals. They're international. This was a competition we won. Can't talk about that. Okay, that's it.